core of all animation is proper understanding and use of keyframes. Regardless of how well your conceptual understanding of animation is, unless you know how to transform those concepts into moving images, you won't get a whole lot done. This video will give you a basic crash course in some keyframing techniques. So to start off, I'm just going to assume that you know at least the very basics of keyframes and how they work. If you don't, then basically, in order to get one thing to move from one place on the screen to another, you set two keyframes and the computer will interpolate the data between the two. So if we want this little white square to move from the left side of the screen to the right side of the screen, we would change its position data from 0 frames all the way up until 24 frames at 1 second, which would, when viewed, take the little cube from one side to the other. This is the most basic form of animation in all of After Effects, which is basically just taking one value and transitioning it to another value at a perfectly straight slope. If you wanted to smooth out that transition and make it feel a little bit more natural, the easiest thing to do would be to take those two keyframes and then press the F9 button, which will turn them into these types of keyframes, which are easy ease keyframes. And you'll see there's a little bit of a difference in the way that they move. It speeds up at the beginning and then it has to slow down. This makes it feel a little bit more natural in our minds because when things move in real life, they don't immediately go from one speed to full speed. They actually take time to speed up and then slow down. It adds a sense of weight to the object. So that in and of itself is one of the simpler ways to kind of ease out your keyframes and make them feel a little bit more natural. Another way is to use the graph editor, which is essentially doing the same thing as Easy Ease, but doing it manually. So if we come here and we click this button, this is the graph editor, it will open it up and you can see right here, this is a perfectly straight slope where the angle of the slope essentially represents the speed at which the object is traveling. So if we zoom in here, press the plus button a couple times, we'll be able to get a little bit better control of things here. And so if we come back out and select these two keyframes, and then click F9 to turn them into Easy Ease, we can see what the computer is doing for us. It's taking it and it's evening out the slope at both the start and the end of the animation. But what we can do, since we have the graph editor, is we can actually take each of these individual values and alter the curves and the slopes ourselves. So this green line here represents the y-axis, and the x-axis, the red line represents the x-axis. Right now it's only moving in the x direction, left and right horizontally, so there's actually no slope at all associated with this here. What we can do is we can click this button down here, which says XYZ. It is the Separate Dimensions button. And then we can take each of these pieces, and with these little handles, we can individually adjust the slopes and curves of how the animation interpolates. Now you can do all different kinds of things where we can actually, if we pull it down here, we see that it starts and it actually moves backwards a little bit because we're actually reversing the speed here to be a negative, which means it would be moving to the left. If you did well in algebra, this will probably be a lot easier for you to understand, but even if you don't, you can just do a lot of trial and error and play around, even with really, really simple animations like a simple moving white square, and see how each of these little handles affects things. So if we do this here, so we're actually pulling it past the axis, but what happens on each of these, it will actually overshoot backwards, then move across, and then overshoot, and then come back. So one of the nice things is since you can affect these however you want, if you grab this thing and hold the shift, it'll make sure that you don't pull it past that axis. Pulling this handle out to the left and right will determine how much it's affecting the speed at different times. And so if we pull it out real far here at the beginning, it'll take longer for it to speed up, and then it'll quickly slow down at the end if we make this one shorter. So if we preview that, that's what it'll look like. Whereas if we pull it real tight and far out on both of these, take a real long time to speed up, go real fast in the middle, and then take a good long time to slow down. Which is essentially just Easy Ease, but more dramatic. And then we can even just pull this out all the way, and you can see how dramatic it actually gets. So using these, you can use different concepts that you have of animation in general and be able to manipulate those into getting things to feel exactly how you want. This kind of animation feels completely different than just two basic keyframes, which honestly are just kind of boring. Hope that helps, and happy creating.
you.